For the last few decades, the story of LGBTQ plus rights in America has been one of increasing public support. But now a new survey finds that for the first time in years, there's a slight decline in that support. William Brangham takes a closer look.
Throughout 2023, the Public Religion Research Institute, or PRRI, interviewed over 22,000 adults for what it calls its American Values Atlas. Last week, the organization released its findings on views about LGBTQ rights in the U.S. The survey showed, for the first time, support fell for key policies regarding LGBTQ rights. Backing for same-sex marriage dropped 2 percentage points. Support for non-discrimination protections dropped 4 points. And opposition to people refusing services based on religious grounds dropped 5 points. To help us understand this data, we are joined by CEO of PRRI, Melissa Deckman. You have been doing this survey for years, and this being the first time you've seen a downward tick in those numbers, how do you explain that?
Yeah, we were somewhat surprised to see after several years of increasing support among Americans for LGBTQ rights that we saw a decline. But I think if you look under the hood, so to speak, and look at the data more closely, it's really largely driven by party polarization. And so we saw much steeper declines, for example, among Republicans in terms of their support for these issues, whereas Democrats tended to stay relatively stable. And I think what's happening is that you see many Republican leaders in red states really trying to amp up the volume, so to speak, on LGBTQ rights and really trying to claw back some of those rights across the country. And I think that's had a spillover effect nationally in terms of the attitudes of Republicans, especially on issues with respect to LGBTQ rights.
In your survey, you're talking to people who both affiliate with a particular religion and also non-religious people as well, correct?
That's right. So our surveys are done among Americans nationally. One great thing about the AVA is we also have enough data to look at opinions in all 50 states. But essentially, we get a snapshot of all Americans, including people of faith and people who are unaffiliated. I think it's also important to bear in mind that despite these declines that we've seen, the vast majority of people of faith continue to support the rights of LGBTQ Americans, especially with respect to same-sex marriage and non-discrimination laws.
So for someone who might look at this and think, oh, a 2% decline or a 5% decline is not that substantial, why does this really stand out to you?
I think it stands out because with respect to LGBTQ rights more generally, there has been a growing increase in support among Americans. And part of that is a reflection of the fact that more Americans, especially younger Americans, are identifying as LGBTQ. So younger Americans, more Americans have friends who are LGBTQ, they themselves are LGBTQ, they have colleagues. So there has been this assumption that as we become more, I think, accepting of LGBTQ Americans in our daily lives, that it would just naturally lend itself to people being more supportive of protecting the rights of LGBTQ Americans. But I think this data shows you that that's not necessarily an assumption that is true. And so it's something important to monitor and keep aware of.
I mean, is it perhaps also possible that as people start to identify more publicly and assert their rights and take a more prominent place in society, that we could be seeing the traces of a backlash here?
I think that's exactly what you're seeing. One of the things that we analyze in the report is we look at the relationship between Christian nationalist views and support for LGBT rights. And as you might imagine, Americans who have a tendency to support Christian nationalism are far less likely to support the rights of LGBT Americans, in part because of the theological opposition to the idea of really homosexuality and being queer to begin with. And so I think that there's that important relationship there that we have to really keep in mind.
Could you talk about, are there other below the top lines here, other data points that were of interest to you?
We were really surprised in our findings that younger Americans have trended downward with respect to support for LGBTQ rights. If you look at our data, we find that roughly 1 in 5 Americans age 18 to 29 identify as LGBTQ. But yet what's happened over the past couple of years is that there's been a slight decline among younger Americans. I think the assumption was that because younger Americans are more likely to identify as queer, that we'd always have younger Americans being more supportive. Again, though, you have to look under the hood. It's really party polarization that is driving down support among younger Americans for same-sex marriage, for example. So one number really stands out to us. If you look at young Americans' attitudes about same-sex marriage, in 2020, among Republicans, 2/3 supported same-sex marriage rights. But in last year's data among young Republicans aged 18 to 29, it's less than half. That's a really big cratering of support. I think there was often an assumption among many political analysts that younger Republicans would moderate the party with respect to things like LGBTQ rights or even abortion rights or climate change, et cetera. But what we're finding in this data is that younger Republicans are very conservative socially.
So interesting. For people who are LGBTQ or work to help solidify their rights, what does this survey data tell you about what work lies ahead for them?
Well, I think there's the survey data really points, as we like to say, the canary in the coal mine idea that you can't assume that such rights are going to be held in perpetuity or will increase. And you can't also assume just because the vast majority of Americans support these rights that those rights are going to be legally protected, especially in wake of the Dobbs decision. There's now a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, and there's indication that the rights of same-sex marriage are going to be on the line. You're going to have legal challenges from conservative groups who are going to be fighting to roll back those rights. And I think that this is just a good reminder that those rights shouldn't be taken for granted, that it's going to take political organizing, and that elections have consequences.
All right, that is the CEO of PRRI, Melissa Deckman. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.